Hello, everyone, and welcome to our module on the cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is a part of a cell. It's a system of filaments, and a filament in Latin means a thread. So these are thread-like structures inside of cells. They're all constructed from smaller protein subunits, and they're important for a number of different purposes for the cell. First of all, they help to maintain the shape of the cell. They're important for moving intracellular traffic. And in addition, they pull chromosomes apart and therefore are responsible for part of mitosis. There are three types of filaments that make up the cytoskeleton. Microfilaments, which are also called actin filaments, are the smallest. They're about 7 to 9 nanometers in width. Intermediate filaments are slightly larger, as their name implies, and microtubules are the largest of the filaments. They're about 25 nanometers in size. We'll begin by discussing the microfilaments, which are also called actin filaments. And the reason they are called actin filaments is because they are polymers made up of the protein actin. Basically, multiple actin proteins are linked together to form a long string of actin proteins, and that's what is an actin filament or a microfilament. These types of structures are often found underneath cell membranes, and they have many roles in cells, including maintaining cell shape, cell movement, and many other functions. One of the places you can find microfilaments is in the microvilli. These are important parts of our intestines that I talk about in the GI section. The microvilli are extensions of the intestinal cell membranes. This is a picture of them seen on the screen here, and they're formed from actin filaments which push out the cell membrane and form these microvilli. Another place where you find actin filaments is in muscle fibers. The basic unit of our skeletal muscle is the sarcomere. This is a depiction of a sarcomere shown on the screen here. Sarcomeres are made up of overlapping thin and thick filaments. The thin filaments are actin and associated proteins, and the thick filaments are myosin. And the way our muscles contract is that myosin filaments slide past the actin, and that leads to contraction. Next, let's talk about the intermediate filaments. These are important for maintaining the shape and structure of cells. There are many different subtypes of intermediate filaments. This is a large group of structures, and different types of intermediate filaments are found in different cells. The most important thing to know about these structures is that they are important for identifying tumors. In other words, they are used as tumor markers. In immunohistochemical staining, antibodies are directed against intermediate filament proteins. Specific filaments are associated with certain tumor types, and there are various methods for detecting which antibodies bind to a tumor. So if there is so-called positive staining, meaning that an antibody for a particular intermediate filament binds to the tumor cells, this suggests the tumor origin and type. Let's begin by discussing the intermediate filament vimentin. Vimentin is found in mesenchymal tissue. Mesenchymal tissue means cells or tissues derived from the mesoderm in the embryo. This includes most of our connective and soft tissue in the body, in other words, structures that are not organs. So, for example, fibroblasts are part of mesenchymal tissue. So is skeletal muscle, so is the mesothelium lining of the peritoneum and synovial joints. In addition, mesenchymal tissue includes endothelium and adipocytes and osteoblasts. Another place where you find vimentin is in the Z discs of sarcomeres. We talked about the sarcomeres before and how they include actin filaments, but the Z disc, which is this structure on the edge of the actin and myosin filaments, contains the intermediate filament vimentin and also another one called desmin that we'll discuss in a minute. Because vimentin derives from mesenchymal tissue, it's very useful for identifying sarcomas. Sarcomas are tumors of mesenchymal origin, and they will stain positively for vimentin. There are many subtypes of sarcomas, including liposarcomas, which come from adipocytes, and leiomyosarcomas, which come from smooth muscle. But the point here is that these tumors, because they are sarcomas and because they come from mesenchymal cells, will contain vimentin, and therefore immunohistochemical staining will identify the vimentin and suggest that the tumor type is a sarcoma. Now, what's confusing about vimentin is it's also found in a number of non-sarcoma tumors, and therefore it's used to distinguish these tumors from other lookalikes. For example, renal cell carcinoma contains some vimentin, so do some CNS tumors like meningioma, so do endometrial carcinomas. So these are specialized situations where you can use vimentin to identify one of these tumors and distinguish it from a lookalike. I mentioned desmin before, but it is a muscle filament. It is part of the Z discs and sarcomeres, just like vimentin, and therefore it's a very useful marker for muscle tumors. You can find desmin in rhabdomyosarcomas, in leiomyomas, and leiomyosarcomas. All of these are muscle tumors, and therefore they all contain desmin. Keratin, or cytokeratin, is an intermediate filament found in epithelial cells. It's found in the cytoplasm of these cells. It is an intracellular filament, And there are many subtypes which are often numbered, such as cytokeratin 8, 18, and 19. And because it's an epithelial cell filament, it's very useful for diagnosing epithelial tumors, which will be cytokeratin positive. And one of the most important epithelial cell tumors is squamous cell carcinoma. You can find squamous cell carcinoma in the cervix, in the head and neck, in the lung, in the skin, in the esophagus. And all of these squamous cell tumors, because they derive from epithelial cells, will have evidence of cytokeratin or keratin if you perform immunohistochemical staining. Lamins are intermediate filaments that form the nuclear envelope. The nuclear envelope separates the nucleus of a cell from the cytoplasm. It includes an outer membrane, an inner membrane, and the intermembrane space, and you can find lamins in all of these locations. In fact, they're often called nuclear lamins. And just so you don't get confused, a laminin is an extracellular protein. Don't confuse that with lamins, which are intermediate filaments that surround the nucleus. Neurofilaments are intermediate filaments that are found in neurons, as the name implies. They're especially important in axons, and positive staining for neurofilaments in tumors is often found in many CNS tumors. You can see positive staining for neurofilaments in neuroblastoma, medulloblastoma, and retinoblastoma. The final intermediate filament we'll discuss is called GFAP, which stands for glial fibrillary acidic protein. This is the major intermediate filament of astrocytes. This is a picture of an astrocyte shown on the screen here to remind you of this. In addition, it's also found in some other CNS glial cells. Glial cells are the non-neuron cells of the central nervous system. So this means that you can see positive GFAP staining in some CNS tumors, including astrocytomas and glioblastoma. The last structure we'll discuss are the microtubules. These filaments are polymers made up of alpha and beta tubulin. They are made up of what's known as heterodimer units, and it's called a heterodimer because it's a dimer but of two different things. One is an alpha tubulin protein and one is a beta tubulin protein. This is a picture of what it looks like on the bottom of the screen here. This long thing is a polymer of tubulin dimers, and you can see that each dimer has one alpha tubulin and one beta tubulin. And these dimers polymerize to form a long structure as shown here in this picture, which is sometimes referred to as a protofilament. And each dimer has two GDP molecules, as I've shown in this picture over here on the bottom left. The alpha tubulin has a GDP attached to it that's part of the structure, actually. It's not used for energy. The beta GDP can be hydrolyzed and used for energy. Microtubules grow out from a structure called a centrosome, which is found in the middle of the cell near the nucleus. Because they grow outward from the centrosome, they are considered to have a negative and a positive end. The negative end is near the middle of the cell, near the centrosome. The positive end is away from the centrosome, and they emanate from the centrosome in a star-like pattern, like I've depicted here in my drawing, and they go out towards the cell membrane. Microtubules have a property called dynamic instability. They grow relatively slowly, but then they can rapidly disassemble 100 times faster than they grow. This is called dynamic instability, and it's a characteristic property of all microtubules. Hopefully you have a picture in your mind of a cell which has this system of microtubules all over the place inside the cell. For this reason, the microtubules are very useful to shuttle proteins around. Those proteins can attach to the microtubule and move up and down around the cell. There are proteins called molecular motor proteins which bind and move along the microtubule filaments. These proteins often carry cargo, like organelles like mitochondria or secretory vessels, and they allow the microtubules to be used as a transport system inside the cell. Dynein and kinesin are the important microtubular motor proteins. Kinesin moves structures toward the positive end of the microtubule, and dynein moves structures toward the negative end. Kinesin is important for moving things away from the nucleus and cell body. This is especially important in neurons for moving structures down the axon toward the terminal of the neuron. Dynein is important for movement of vesicles toward the middle of the cell. It's also important for localizing the Golgi apparatus near the cell center. Two of the most important cellular structures that utilize microtubules are cilia and flagella. These are motility structures for cells, and they are built from microtubules and dynein. Cilia are shorter, and they're important in the respiratory tract for moving mucus, and flagella are longer, and they're very important for sperm motility. For the Step 1 exam, it's very high yield to know some of the details of how cilia and flagella function. So the microtubules and proteins in cilia and flagella are formed into a structure called an axoneme. This structure is arranged in a special pattern called a 9x2 pattern. This means there are 9 doublet microtubules in a ring surrounding a pair or 2 microtubules. So if you look at the screen here, we've got a cilia or a flagella sticking out from a cell membrane here. This structure here is called a basal body, which we'll talk about in a minute, and extending upward is the cilia or flagella. If you look at this in cross-section, you would see this structure shown here. You can see that there are 9 microtubules in pairs, shown as the red dots in a circle. In the middle, there is also a pair of microtubules, and this is called the 9x2 arrangement. So as I mentioned previously, the cilia and flagella are secured to the cell surface by a structure called a basal body. That's the blue structure in this picture on the screen here. And the basal body is set up a little bit differently from the other portions of the axoneme. This has 9 groups of fused triplets of microtubules and no central pair. So here's a picture of what the basal body might look like: 9 triplets of microtubules and nothing in the middle. In this zoomed in picture I've shown here of the 9x2 structure, you can see that there are these little blue lines. Those blue lines represent axonemal dynein. This is dynein found in the axoneme, and this will form bridges between microtubules. And when it becomes activated, it will pull on neighboring doublets of microtubules, and this will cause movement of the cilia and flagella. This process requires ATP, so these axonemal dynein proteins are sometimes said to possess microtubule-dependent ATPase activity. And as the doublets slide past one another because of the activated dynein, this leads to bending of the cilia and flagella, and this is how they move. And here are some more pictures just to make this more clear. This is a micrograph just showing you that you can see the 9x2 structure in the cilia. Over here we have a more detailed cartoon. This is the basal body at the bottom. Shown here is a cross-section of the cilia. You can see the 9x2 microtubule structure. You can also see the dynein molecules. There's also depicted some of the other proteins and structures that are important inside of cilia. The most important clinical correlation for you to be aware of all the cell biology related to microtubules and cilia and dynein is a rare disorder called primary ciliary dyskinesia. It's also called the immodal cilia syndrome. In this condition, people are born with cilia that are either unable to beat, or they can't beat normally, or they are absent altogether. This is an inherited condition. It's an autosomal recessive genetic condition, and it's caused by gene mutations in the genes that code for the protein dynein. So if you understand everything I said about the role of dynein in microtubule function, it's easy to understand the clinical features of this disorder. Patients with primary ciliary dyskinesia get recurrent episodes of rhinosinusitis. This is because the linings of the sinuses are irritated and swollen because of excessive mucus production that cannot be cleared because the cilia aren't working. In addition, men with this condition are infertile because they have immotile sperm. The sperm are still viable, it's just that they're immobile and therefore they can't lead to fertilization of the egg. In addition, women with this disorder often have problems because they have dysfunction cilia in their fallopian tubes. This means that it's harder for eggs to move down the fallopian tubes, and there's an increased risk of having an ectopic pregnancy. Some patients with primary ciliary dyskinesia develop what's known as Cartagener syndrome. This is a potential manifestation of primary ciliary dyskinesia. Cartagener syndrome is a triad of chronic sinusitis from ciliary dysfunction, bronchiectasis, which includes chronic cough and recurrent infections also from ciliary dysfunction, and situs inversus. Situs inversus is when the organs in the abdomen are inverted and the left organs are on the right and vice versa. This happens because ciliary function is also important in utero for proper positioning of the abdominal organs. If you look at this CAT scan on the left side of the screen, the liver is on the left side of the body where it should not be. And if you look over here at this CAT scan of the chest, the heart is on the right side of the body where it should not be. This is evidence of situs inversus, and this is part of Cartagener syndrome, which can be seen in primary ciliary dyskinesia. Let me also mention that microtubules are very important for mitosis. In mitosis, chromosomes separate by lining up on the mitotic spindle, which is made up of microtubules. The mitotic spindle then pulls the chromosomes apart so that the cell can divide and form 2 daughter cells. And there are a number of drugs used in various clinical circumstances that work by acting on microtubules and inhibiting their function. For example, in cancers, the drugs vincristine and vinblastine inhibit polymerization of microtubules. The drug paclitaxel enhances polymerization and blocks breakdown. Both of these drugs inhibit mitosis, and therefore they function on rapidly dividing cells, including cancer cells. And I discuss all of these drugs in more detail in videos in the hematology section. Colchicine is a drug used in gout. It prevents microtubule assembly. This disrupts chemotaxis of immune system cells and generation of cytokines and phagocytosis. All of these things have an effect in gout, and if you inhibit them, it can potentially limit the symptoms of gout. Griseofulvin is a drug used to treat fungal infections. It inhibits microtubule function in fungi and therefore helps treat the infection. And mebendazole is a drug used to treat helminth or worm infections. Worms are dependent on a complex system of microtubules. Mebendazole inhibits those microtubules, and this can help to kill the worms. And that concludes our video on the cytoskeleton.